Welcome to this webinar from Contact a Family on why parent carer forums need a financial policy. This is part of our learning and development offer for parent carer forums. Those of you joining us live by PC, laptop, tablet or smartphone, you should be able to see this introductory slide. If you can't see the slide, please send an email to Ruth Stannard and she'll try to help you. Ruth's email address is ruth.stannard, which is STANNARD, @cafamily.org.uk. We're using relatively new technology, so please bear with us if you happen to lose us for a couple of minutes, but hopefully it won't happen. We want you to be able to ask questions during the webinar, but as there are so many of you attending, it's not really practical to take verbal questions. Therefore, everyone will remain muted throughout. If at any point during the presentation you have any questions, please use the question icon on the GoToWebinar toolbar on your screen, which is highlighted by the blue arrow. This will allow you to type your question into the box and we'll submit it to Ruth, the web administrator. If you'd like to remain anonymous with your question, please let Ruth know. Otherwise, when Catherine answers, she might mention your name. The webinar is scheduled to last for a maximum of an hour and a half, depending on the number of questions. The questions will be brought through to Catherine at the end and she'll answer as many as she can in the time allowed. If there are any similar questions, Catherine will try and answer these all at once, but if there are more complex questions, what Catherine will do is put an answer together, which will be posted on the website when the webinar goes live next week online. Lastly, at the end of the webinar, there'll be a short questionnaire. Please take the time to complete this, as it will help us to assist with future online training events. I'll now hand over to Catherine Ratcliffe, one of our associates who's worked with many of you, many forums across England.
Good morning everyone that's joined the webinar. We're going to start by asking, why should parent carer forums have a financial control policy? Well, internal financial controls are essential checks and procedures that help parent carer forums and ensure the quality of financial reporting by keeping adequate accounting records and preparing timely and relevant financial information. If a parent carer forum is to achieve its aims, then the steering group, committee or whatever you call yourselves, you need to ensure that grant monies are properly used and that its funds are spent effectively and its financial affairs are well managed. Financial controls reduce but do not eliminate the risk of losses through theft and fraud, bad decisions, human error. Financial controls reduce the risk of those happening. Financial control can also help you to achieve value for money outcomes. As a forum, together you've made the decision to apply for a grant, and therefore, as a body, you are collectively responsible for establishing, implementing and monitoring internal financial controls. So how should forums manage the accounts? Well, your treasurer or organisation that you've commissioned for this purpose will normally do the management of the accounts. A method of financial reporting should be in place which reports to members the financial information they need to manage the forum's financial affairs. It is advisable that this financial reporting takes place quarterly. It may be that the parent participation forum sits within a larger organisation, or indeed that it has a charity status. However, you are asked to ensure that for the purposes of this grant, parents must be at the very heart of decision making about how to spend the grant and must have control of it. Some financial control policies are complex and seem not to be in an accessible format for parent forums. It's therefore quite legitimate in these circumstances that the forum has a separate policy for the administration of the forum funding. An example of this can be found on the Contact a Family website. How forums should manage their accounts as we go on is in submitting your grant application, you will spell out exactly what you intend to use the money for and the activity you will be having throughout the year. You should then draw up an action plan to give structure to your intentions. Alongside each activity, you should estimate the financial resources that you require to do the activity. In other words, you should plan your budget for the future financial period. One of the ways that I've been helping forums to do this is when you make a submission for your grant and you state the activity you intend for the year, it's good to draw up the action plan and to colour code that action plan and have the estimated amount that you need to spend on the activity in the end column. Whenever you carry out that activity, it's good practice to highlight what the document that you've used in the colour that's on the plan, and this makes your monitoring much more accessible to you at the end of the year. So in summary, financial control policies protect the parent carer forum. I'm very keen to ensure in the work that I do with forums that the forum members are safeguarded. It supports you in the monitoring of your spend and it ensures that you obtain value for money. It's good practice for any organisation in receipt of a grant, and it's now a requirement in applying for the grant from the Department for Education. Okay, so what should be in your policy? You should have in your policy the management of financial records, your banking arrangements. Can I just say as well, when you put the banking arrangement, please make sure that you don't put the account number on the document that you're submitting. This becomes a little bit of a public document as you share it among yourselves and other partners probably. So don't put the account number on it. You should have information about receipts, about cheque payments, about your petty cash payments, expenses, any honorariums, payment documentation for staff, and other rules that affect your particular forum. Can I also say it would be advisable for the policy to be signed and dated? And one question has been asked about who should sign the policy. Well, it would seem sensible for the Treasurer and the Chair on behalf of the other members to sign that policy. So managing your accounts, you will have appointed a Treasurer, and you may have commissioned somebody for this purpose who would do the accounts. A method of financial reporting should be in place which reports to members the financial information they need to manage the forum's financial affairs. So going back to your action plan and how you've recorded the amounts of money you will spend, it's good for members to understand that that money has been spent for the purpose for which it was designed. It's advisable that financial reporting takes place quarterly, but I know that some forums do report on the finances at each of their steering group and committee meetings. So, about keeping records of the financial activity. The financial activity should be recorded. Accounting records means that documents and books of accounts kept by your forum of money coming into and going out of the parent carer forum. It's also good advice to have a record of your assets. Many forums have spent monies on equipment, and it's good to have a record of that. So, for example, laptops, telephones, even things that you've bought for promotional purposes, banners, all of that, those sort of things that you spent the money on, it's good to have them as your assets and listed. So keeping the records is often referred to as a cash account system, and in basic terms you enter the information about any money coming in and any money that you spend. About the banking arrangements, these may vary depending on whether or not the forum manages its own grant money or whether it's commissioned this from another organisation. For those forums managing their own grant, the forum will bank with a bank or building society, and the policy will contain information about the name of the bank and the branch, and that the accounts will be held in the name of, and you state the name of your forum. Again, I just want to reiterate that in submitting your policy, please don't put the account number on the policy document. You should have on there information about a bank mandate and list the people who can sign cheques on the forum's behalf. This should be approved and minuted by your committee steering group, as would any changes to it. Sometimes this becomes difficult when somebody who has been a signatory on your cheques leaves your organisation, and you just don't have the time, or you forget to make sure that another person gets added to the bank mandate, so you need to keep an eye to that. The forum will require the bank to provide statements every month, and this is normal practice, and these will be reconciled with the cash book at least every 3 months. The treasurer will check that this reconciliation has been done at least twice a year, signing the cash book accordingly. The forum should not use any other bank or financial institution or use overdraft facilities or loan without the previous agreement of the committee and the steering group. If possible, you should aim to maintain a reserve in your account equal to 3 months of the running costs, or £200, whichever is the higher, and this needs to be determined and recorded by the steering group. And for those forums who commission their financial management, they should establish an agreement about how and when account summaries will be presented. Many people in our own personal lives, I guess, and and some forums prefer these days to use online banking, as many of the bank branches have closed and they find it easier. But you should still maintain some controls on that, and you need to limit the access to your banking, and I would suggest 3 people, as you would probably have on a bank mandate. Limit the number of cash cards, and again I'll try and make sure that there are no more than 2 cash cards around, and it allows you to set up your back payments for your employees' salaries. You can then print out the statements and share them with the committee or steering group on a regular basis. I think we have to acknowledge how very, very busy parents and carers can be, and they are volunteers. So what controls should there be in place to ensure that they do not, by omission, mismanage the spending of the grant? I would advise that all decisions on spending should be made at your forum's steering group or committee meeting, and must be recorded. Don't do it on, as the meeting's ended and it's a passing comment. You sort of safeguard yourselves by making proper records and minutes of the decisions that you make. So for the cheque payments, the treasurer will be responsible for holding the chequebook, and any unused or partly used chequebooks should be kept in a safe and secure place. Each cheque should be signed by at least 2 people, and a cheque must never be signed by the person to whom it's payable. So if you're one of the people that are claiming money back and you're a signatory on the account, please don't sign it yourself. Get the other two people to sign it. And don't ever sign blank cheques. Make sure that the relevant payee's name is always inserted into the cheque before it's signed. And the cheque stub should always be properly completed. I think it's something I forget in my personal accounting, and then I wonder where that cheque has been paid to. So we can do it easily, but please make sure that the stub is completed and you've got proper records and proper trail. And no cheque should be signed without original documentation. When you're paying by cash, if the forum wishes, they can maintain a petty cash float, and the treasurer or the person that's representing you on financial matters should be entrusted with this with prior agreement of the committee and the steering group. And when that float petty cash is more or less expended, a cheque should be drawn for sufficient funds to bring the float up to the agreed sum. Now the grant, as you know, makes provision for parent carers to claim expenses when they're on forum business, and these need to be reflected in your financial policy. Many forums have a remuneration policy in place, and some have these arrangements set out within their constitutional arrangements. It's important that the forums have clear and transparent policies about how expenses and honorariums are paid to parent carers to remunerate their activity. This may be a separate policy to the financial policy, but the two should be linked and referenced across. So within your finance policy, you should include how the forum will reimburse expenditure in terms of parent expenses, and how monies will be paid personally to volunteers or to staff, and providing that it's been agreed and minuted, you should be okay. One of the things that came up in one of the forums that I was working with was about when you go to a supplier, let's say Tesco, for example, and you get the points on your points card. Now, we don't want to give away the points back to Tesco, but we want to be absolutely watertight. So make sure that if you are somebody who is purchasing things on behalf of your forum on a regular basis from Tesco or other outlets, then you agree that how the points will be collected, because they can be substantial and significant. When you're making claims for your expenses, you need to evidence fares by providing the tickets. Other expenditure is evidenced by original receipts containing items claimed against, and only those items. I have worked with a number of forums where, and I go back to parents being very busy people and calling for something on the way to the meeting or something, and also requiring something for tea. Please do not put them all on the same receipt. Make sure you have a separate receipt for anything that you purchase on behalf of your parent carer forum. Any car mileage reimbursement should be based on agreed and reasonable mileage rates. And again, it's good practice to have a mileage claim form that you submit along with the request for payment. No cheque signatory signs for the payment of expenses to themselves. Honorarium claims should be accompanied by a record of what it's being paid for, and to demonstrate alongside the agreed activity that has taken place. So are there any other things that the forum should be mindful of in preparing for their financial control policy? Each individual forum works in a similar way, but has its own particular local conditions. So things that you may wish to consider for inclusion would be that any member of the committee or steering group who has a personal interest in or a connection to an organisation or individual who is already being paid by the forum or intends to quote for work being commissioned by the forum must declare this interest and have it minuted at the committee. So if you've managed to secure some office accommodation, for example, and a relative is able to do some repair work or joinery work, make sure that when you agree that that person's going to carry out the work, that a declaration of interest is minuted at your meeting. The purchase of goods and services over a value agreed by the committee or steering group will be subject to obtaining at least 2 quotes, and this is connected to the best value principles. And the subsequent decisions based on those value for money principles should be minuted by the steering group. It's advisable for the forums committee or steering group to review your policy annually to ensure that it is effective and it meets the requirements of your forum. And this should include an assessment of whether the controls are relevant to and appropriate for the forum, and to make sure that they're not too onerous or disproportionate. I mean, some of the policies really that have been submitted are quite complex, and they need to be easily understood and accessible to whoever joins the forum. And that concludes the presentation. So we're at a time when you can submit your questions, and I'll just take a few minutes to have a look at some of the ones that have come in. Right, this is a question from Louise Graham, who I think may not be many miles away from me where I'm doing this presentation. And Louise asks, can she ask what you class as reasonable mileage rates, and do we follow the HMRC guidelines of 45 pence a mile? I think, Louise, that's entirely up to the forum. That 45 pence, it seems to be in line with local authority mileage rates, and many of the forums have put on their policy that that their mileage rates are at the level of the local authority. So, you know, it does seem reasonable. While you know, we know that probably 45 pence is quite a good amount of money for the fuel. You've also got wear and tear on your car, so 45 pence is I think a reasonable amount. But again, I have to stress that that is entirely up to the forum members to decide. I hope that's okay. Okay, Jane Stevens is asking about back payments, and is it acceptable to use these for paying general invoices? Yes, it is, Jane, providing, as I say, that you've agreed that we will pay these by backs, and that you record all of the payments in your cash analysis. Oh, Jane, you've been busy. You're asking me another one. The point about 2 quotes, at what level would you instigate this policy? Well, I don't think, Jane, would it be sort of for general things like whether you need to buy a new set of mugs for the meetings or whatever. But I think when you would be buying larger pieces of equipment, or you would be having some work done, I think that's when. But it's very difficult to say at what level in terms of monetary level that would be at. But it would be when you were making a significant spend, I would say. Okay, Stuart's asking me, Stuart Moy, sorry Stuart, I can't pronounce your surname, but where do you stand if at a given time only 2 people would come forward as signatories. Difficult one, and especially when we talk about if you're owed money, then you're not one of the people who signs the cheque, and I guess it of course would be preferable to have 3 people. That would safeguard you, but if only 2 people will do it, then that's what you have to go with. Again, Stuart, I would say make sure that if you're one of the signatories and you're having to sign for something that you're claiming back yourself, that it's very open to the rest of the steering group and that it is recorded. There's a question here about whether there's a sample of financial policy available on the website. Yes, there are. There is one example currently, but in my work looking at the financial control policies, we have witnessed 2 or 3 other examples, and one where it sits within a larger organisation that look to be good practice, and we have sought permission for those organisations to share their policies with you. So I think they will be available shortly. Marion asks about, Marion Horn is asking, is it ever acceptable not to have receipts if you say, if for example the spend is under £10? I would say, and I know this is a very onerous task, I would say always provide the receipt if you can. Questions can be asked about that because that amount of money that can mount up. So if you've got people who are requiring remuneration or a payments, and it's happening, say at you're meeting 3 or 4 times, you're quickly building up quite a lot of expenditure that isn't accounted for by receipts. So my view would be always submit the receipts to safeguard yourselves. We have another question. It's quite lengthy, so I'm just going to take a minute to have a look at it again. This is from Caroline, and it asks, if your forum has a fund holder that is a reputable, long-standing business or charity, a third party, at various relevant places in the financial policy document, does the forum, A, simply say the forum passes this on to the third party who deals with it under their financial policy, or B, the forum passes this on to the third party to be dealt with under their financial policy, which is, and provide the details of the third party's financial procedures. Okay. I think the point I was trying to make in the presentation about this is I have come across forums that hand over the financial monitoring to a third party, and on occasions little information is provided to the forum. It's a little bit like participation scaled down. Parents should be at the heart of the decision making on the spend. So providing you're at the heart of deciding how the money is spent and have an awareness of how that is being managed, that is the principle. I have worked with a forum recently that sits within a larger organisation, and we have drawn from that a policy that meets the requirements of the grant application and will dovetail very well into the larger organisation. And I will seek permission of that forum to share that with you. This is Stuart again, and we have made the mistake of purchasing an item at the same time as buying something else. Although we will not do it again, will this be okay? I may have misinterpreted that, and it may be that you've bought something without getting the receipt,
like separate.
for getting a separate receipt. I think my answer to that now, Stuart, would be you've done it, don't do it again. Okay, we've got another question from Jane, Jane Stevens. Childcare receipts, we are aware that request is for receipts only from registered childcare, but some children prefer to stay with family members. Can you cover childcare in these instances? I think that is a decision that you need to take at your individual forum. If your child is distressed by being with a registered child care provider, then that is a difficult position to put you in when somebody else can care for your child, a preferred person caring for your child. And I think, I really do think that's a decision for your forum. Okay, right, Julie, you're asking, what is the difference between an honorarium, remuneration, I always struggle with that word, petty cash, and a paid salary for forums? Well, there is usually an honorarium is paid to somebody who's done some work for you, a piece of work for you, and you decide that you want to make the payment, and they may not have said at the outset what the charge may be or whether or not they want paying, but you've agreed that they'll be remunerated in some kind of way. Petty cash, again, you could pay somebody in cash rather than through a cheque, if that's what you're asking me, Julie. But again, I would make sure that that is agreed and recorded within your cash analysis book. And if it's something that you do regularly, then again, make sure that you record it. If you have a paid salary from the forum, then there would be other issues like tax and national insurance and all of those sorts of things that go with employing somebody, what we commonly class as the on-costs of an employee. I hope that answers that for you, Julie. It may not, and I will give a lengthier answer on the website when it goes public. They're telling me that there's lots of questions coming through. Somebody asks, what if the forum uses the local authority financial regulations, where the forum has close links to Parent Partnership Service, and this is on the view that the Parent Partnership Service is an arm's length provider of the local authority. Should forums agree this as part of the constitution policy, or is it advised that they have their own financial policy? I would say have your own financial policy. You may use the similar remit and wording of the Parent Partnership Service financial policy, but make it your own, I would say. Yes, I've just been passed some information that it's worth, when we're talking about honorariums and remuneration that Julie asked about, I think. Yeah, it's worth having a look at Lance's webinar on honorariums and paying parents. It's already in there. Question about childcare, which more detail answer. Okay. What Carolyn's telling me is there's a fairly complex question coming in about childcare payments that will require a more lengthy and thought through answer, which we'll do later. There's been a question about, can expenses be paid with gift cards? I see through some of the looking at some of the monitoring recently that I've been working on, that has been a practice, but it's not advisable to do that. I think we would advise you not to develop that practice. Here's another question from Stuart. If a receipt over 6 months old has been lost, is a handwritten receipt or correct company-headed paper acceptable? Example, the company cannot go back more than 6 months to print a receipt, but can see the sale. I guess it has to be acceptable, Stuart, if you've got no other method of providing that. But again, I think this helps us to think and sharpen our practice in the management of finances on a day-to-day basis. I think we're all learning what can happen when spend can't be evidenced in a proper way. So I would try and make sure in the future that you have the appropriate receipts for the spend. If the provider could actually put something on headed paper, if they can see the sale on their system, they could write you a letter on headed paper, yes, that would be acceptable, but in retrospect that would be okay. But say in future practice, if you can make sure that you have got the receipts. And we are the world's worst sometimes for pushing receipts in our pockets and bags and briefcases, but I think we learn through practice to hold on to them and treasure them. We're just waiting for the next questions to be handed over. This is a question from Simon in Nottinghamshire, and the question is, if we wish to amend, tweak current grant, is there a process we need to follow in which to make any changes? And like any sensible person doing a presentation, I'm now going to hand over to Carolyn to answer that.
Hi, the answer is yes. We do have an agreed process where we have what's called a grant variation request. So really what you need to do is contact your regional advisor and just explain what you'd like to change and why. And they just then have a short form to fill in which goes through has the request come from the forum, what they'd like to change, the reasons why this are, and what it amounts to. And as long as that fits with the conditions of grant and we can see that there's a legitimate reason for doing that, then there shouldn't be an issue with it. It then just needs to get approved, and then the forum should be able to amend the spend. We just need to keep an audit trail for it. So hopefully that answers your question.
This is from Carol. We are planning to use internet banking going forward. Is it possible to have more than one person to authorise a payment? I'm not sure about that, and that's something I think you would need to check with the bank that you're using if you're making payments online. Let me just think about it, Carol. So if you're making payments online and two people or three people have access, it's how you do that. And I think I'm not sure of that kind of technical aspect of the banking. I would check with your bank. That appears to conclude the questions that have come through currently. So I'm going to hand over to Carolyn now to end the session.
Thanks. If anybody has any further questions, please feel free to email them either to Ruth on the email address I gave earlier, Reed Stannard, or send them to Catherine and she will try and answer them for you. And the childcare question, we'll send a response to that, and also the answers to the questions will be put on with the session when it goes onto the website next week. I'd like to thank Catherine for doing the webinar and for answering all the questions as they came in. As I said, she'll endeavour to answer all the questions fully, and they'll come on the website next week when we put the recording of the webinar up. And we've also, as Catherine mentioned earlier, got agreement from 3 forums to include their financial control policies on the website. These include a forum sitting within a larger organisation, a small forum and a charity. So it should give forums an idea of the different sort of organisations that forums have become and their financial policies. Hopefully those of you who've listened will now have a clearer idea of why the financial policy is needed and what to include in it, and you'll be able to develop and submit your policy, which will enable you to apply for the second part of the grant. If you have any queries relating to the policy, please contact your regional advisor or contact Catherine. She'll be reviewing all the policies as they come in and be providing bespoke feedback to forums, A, to say that yes, this is great and it fulfills the requirements, B, it might need a little bit of strengthening in certain areas, or if it needs a bit more work, Catherine will get in touch.